call that number. You can text that number. And it is the humiliated edition of the program. What do you mean, Swanny? Humiliated. Help me out. All right, so you know this. One of my policies is that I really try not to listen to other sports radio conversations before I venture into the studio with you for a couple of reasons, actually. One, I do this, as George Carlin would say, incredibly moronic thing called thinking, and I like to come up with my own opinions, and I like to formulate my own thoughts on things. But I heard something today that sort of shocked me just a little bit. I picked my daughter up from school. I was bringing her the palatial 108 studios to take care of business for you. And I heard a national analyst. Should I mention his name? I'll give you his initials. His initials are Brock Heward. Oh, sorry. BH. So I heard Brock Heward today talking about Clemson in Georgia. And he was going through the polls and talking about the Georgia Bulldogs, by the way, who are currently ranked number 2 in the AP poll this week. Your Clemson Tigers fall out of the top 5 for the first time in ages, since 2017, the second longest streak in the history of the AP rankings. Clemson was ranked inside the top 5 for 57 consecutive weeks. The only team ever to go longer than that was Alabama, who did it 68 consecutive weeks. Clemson still has a streak of 95 straight weeks in the top 10 of the college football polls. Your Tigers at 6, just on the outside, right where your boy Swanny said they would be. You couldn't watch Clemson and Georgia and leave that game and say that one team, as I said yesterday, was just stellar and the other team was atrocious. If anything, you had two teams very equally matched. You might even could convince me if you wanted to, based on what we saw from Oklahoma, based on what we saw from Ohio State, maybe even based on what we saw from Texas A&M last week, that if you wanted to put some semblance of this order being Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, 1, 2, 3 in the polls, even going 0-1, I might could give you a reasonable case to make that argument in front of me, Your Honor. I might hear that out. But what I cannot hear out are national analysts who, when talking about Georgia, say that they humiliated Clemson. Now, you know this. I am no Bill Shakespeare. I am certainly not the grammar police and for all the writing that I do on ClemsonSports.com. I am sure there are multiple errors that we have to weed through, that you have to go through when you're reading any article that I write. But humiliated? I'm trying to figure out if I missed something when we went through the definition of humiliated when I was in Ms. Zidlick's class in high school. Perhaps I missed that. But that was what was said. It said that Georgia humiliated Clemson in Charlotte. And you know this if you tune into this show. And you know this if you are a Gamecock who peeks over the fence to hang out with us.
So you can continue to peek over the fence at the best radio show in the nation.
Your boy Swanny calls it like he sees it. If Clemson had been humiliated by Georgia in the Queen City on Saturday night, your boy would have been the first in the building to bring that up yesterday on the program. Had Clemson been humiliated on the field of play, I would have been the first to say it. That was a competitive game between two of the best defenses perhaps in the country, maybe two of the best teams in the country, and it was eerily similar and reminiscent to LSU's 9-6 victory over Alabama in 2011, to which the only negative that I could say about that game was it was a boring game. Clemson's game against Georgia was boring. If you wanted to say Clemson bored Georgia off of the field of play in Charlotte, I might tend to agree. Both teams were pretty boring offensively. Humiliated? Now, in fairness to Brock, I could only listen to a smidgen, a snippet of what he had to say before I was home and getting prepared for the show that shakes the Southland. So perhaps he walked back those words post haste. But as of the time I walked into my house, it would be nice walking in your own building. As I walked into the Swanny Towers, that was still on my mind, fresh as a daisy. Humiliated. Georgia humiliated Dabo Swinney's Clemson Tigers. Did he think it was 100-3? Like, if Georgia beat Clemson 100-3, that's a humiliation. 803-450-0086. What would you call it, though? I mean, honest to goodness, I don't know how in the world somebody could go on the radio with a straight face and say that Clemson got humiliated.
That is ridiculous.
Doesn't make any sense, does it? Anyway, your Clemson Tigers ranked number 6 in the polls. Still right in the mix, and maybe, just maybe, throwing out my thought process on what has to happen for Clemson to get back into the college football playoff. Maybe not a lot at this point. Forget all the stuff about what I said yesterday about how Georgia's got this little tiebreaker over Clemson in the 1v1. If it just comes down to the committee in Grapevine, Texas, picking the top 4 teams, which is how it's supposed to shake out, I don't know that you did yourself any harm in what happened in Charlotte outside of being, well, of course, humiliated. My goodness. 803-450-0086, the Honey King of the Upstate, Kyle, in the house today. Nick also shared the program. That's a penalty, Nick. Now you got to take your punishment. And if you are watching right now, go to our YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button. Dude, we are going to do it. We're going for 1,000 subscribers by game 6. And I got a sneaky feeling at this rate, what you guys have done over the past 3 weeks, we might hit 1,000 before week 3. But it's going to take you diving in right now, going over there, hitting that subscribe button to help continue to grow the show that shakes the Southland. Again, your website, ClemsonSportsTalk.com. It's where you can hang out. SCU says, "Stop looking at me, Swan." Greatest line, perhaps, outside of, I don't know, I could have been a contender. Like, there's that line, and then there's "Stop looking at me, Swan." Say hello to my little friend. Maybe third behind some of the more iconic. Okay, fourth behind. Here's looking at you, kid. I'm just saying, there's a few great lines in movies ahead of "Stop looking at me, Swan," but not many. Spencer chimes into the program. He says the domination argument is weak, right? Humiliated, dominated. If you want to come in and say that Georgia dominated the line of scrimmage defensively against Clemson's offensive line, I'll entertain that. I'll hear you. I will say, well, I don't know what that says about what Clemson's defense did against Georgia, because neither offense was really at any point in that game able to capitalize on a whole lot of momentum. Georgia, as a matter of fact, I could get into a conversation that their final drive to run out of the clock felt like their most successful drive. Like, that felt like, even though they had another drive that they got down and got a field goal, that drive to me felt like the most successful drive they had of the night, because it was the one that locked up the ball game for them. It was the drive that sealed the deal. And everything else they did that night offensively had little to none to do with who won and lost that game. Who won and lost that game came down to Clemson's offensive mistake by DJ Uyunglele throwing the interception pick six to the house, 74 yards. And that was a weird drive because remember, that play came right after the ball careened off of a Georgia player on a punt. Clemson kind of got a little lucky momentum. Maybe even was going in for a score right before the half. I mean, you got 3 minutes, just under 3 minutes left, and then boom, that play happens. And it's sort of like being in a boxing match, and you got this guy maybe on the ropes a little bit, and he just swings a haymaker, boom, and catches you before you get to the bell, and you're having trouble the rest of the night answering what happened. And that when they go to the scorecard and the judges take a look and they score it for that one big hit. And that's what that touchdown ends up being for Georgia. It was the one big hit in the ball game, and Clemson didn't have a defensive answer. Even when they had opportunities, to some degree, they let the Bulldogs off the hook by their own accord. Absolutely. Tony Elliott mentioned as much. And then, of course, just some poor decisions, perhaps by wideouts, poor decisions based on what DJ had to do, maybe holding the ball a couple of times too long, but not all of that falling into the lap of DJ Uiagalelei. Again, your Clemson Tigers this weekend will take on SC State, looking to bounce back, looking to get to 500 on the season, but still sitting pretty in the AP top 25. A quick rundown, 1 through 5, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M. Clemson heads up the next group of 5. Clemson at 6, Cincinnati at 7, Notre Dame's 8, Iowa State 9, and Iowa is ranked number 10. Penn State's 11, Oregon 12, Florida 13, Southern Cal 14. Texas checks in at number 15. UCLA all the way up to 16 after beating LSU 38-27 this weekend. Coastal Carolina, the Chanticleers at 17. Wisconsin at 18. Virginia Tech at 19. And Ole Miss checks in at number 20. Utah's 21. Miami is at 22. Arizona State 23. North Carolina plummets to number 24 after their loss to Virginia Tech to open the season. And then Auburn checks in at number 25. So that's a quick look at the AP poll. Interesting to note, again, Clemson at 0-1, ranked higher, and this is where college football playoff 10, 12, 13 weeks from now conversations could be very favorable for Clemson, at number 6 with a loss, ahead of Cincinnati, Notre Dame, Iowa State, Iowa, Penn State, Oregon, Florida, Southern Cal, Texas, a 2-0 UCLA team. Ahead of those squads who are currently undefeated. This is the benefit of the doubt that we talk about a lot with Alabama. This is the benefit of the doubt that Dabo Swinney's tenure at Clemson has now given them in the polls. And this is the benefit of the doubt that you get losing a hotly contested, excuse me. This is what you get after being humiliated by Georgia, according to Brock Heward, in a game there in Charlotte. But again, as long as Georgia continues to press forward at number 2 in the country, I don't see them surpassing Alabama unless the Crimson Tide fall off, right? But if Georgia holds that number 2 line and Clemson sit there at number 6, at some point along the way, Texas A&M and Alabama hook up. One of those teams is going to drop out. And then I don't think Oklahoma has looked unbelievably invincible. And certainly Ohio State did not look invincible in week 1. So there is still, I think, that off chance that Clemson could still slide back into the top 4, even before the College Football Playoff Committee's rankings come out. And no matter how you look at it, human beings are influenced by the polls. Human beings are influenced by what they see on the television every single weekend when they're watching college football and when these announcers are talking about the best teams in the country. And it would be very difficult for me to believe that if Clemson just sits there at 6 and works their way up to 5 and maybe even gets to 4, that when that first rendition of the College Football Playoff rankings come out, the Tigers aren't right in the mix. Maybe sooner than I thought. The biggest problem is, what if Oklahoma, Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama continue to win? And what if the Georgia Bulldogs' sole loss this year comes in the SEC championship? I mean, that, again, is the main scenario to keep your eyeballs on at this point. I know it's a 1-week season. I get it. I understand that the eyes got to be and your focus has got to be on SC State. Like I understand the rules that Swanny has for the 18 to now what with the way college football's gone, 35-year-old players out there, but the 18 to 22, 23-year-old guys, I get it. You have to be focused on the next game. The next game is the most important game. You're a fan, though. You're a fan. You're allowed to think ahead. You're allowed to peek weeks down the line and go, ooh, okay. So the biggest concern I think you've got right now as a Clemson fan, by the way, if you're a Clemson player listening to the podcast edition, the biggest concern you have is SC State. Keep your mind focused. But for the fans listening to the show today, if you peer out through the remainder of the college football season, you still have those 4 teams in front of you, possibly even including A&M, and where A&M could be the fly in the ointment is if Jimbo Fisher's squad finds a way to beat Alabama. And if they were to just narrowly defeat Alabama, the impact that could have not just on the playoffs, but on Clemson, because then you might have this argument at some point down the line about Clemson versus Alabama. These 2 one-loss teams that were barely defeated by the 2 teams in Texas A&M and Georgia, who maybe clash for the SEC championship. And at that point, maybe all bets are off. At that point, maybe Clemson or Alabama that gets into the playoff is determined by, does Georgia beat A&M? Does A&M beat Georgia in the SEC championship game? So, again, a lot of meat left on the bone. Way too early to be overly concerned about anything. Georgia's schedule not loaded with a ton of heavy lifting. Alabama and A&M hook up on October the 9th, so we're not all that far out from that matchup. But some of this is going to begin to clear itself up. Unfortunately for you, as Clemson Tiger faithful, some national analysts think you got humiliated on Saturday night. I don't get it. Again, maybe he walked it back after he said it, but he didn't walk it back while I was in the car. 803-450-0086. 803-450-0086. Yes, Spencer brings up that 9-6 ball game. That game was rough back in the day to watch. I never will forget, but those 2 teams played again in the national championship. In Alabama, who scored 6 points that day, ended up dominating that national championship game. I don't remember the final score. Was that final score of that national championship like 21-0? I mean, it was a pretty decent margin. That would be the 2012 maybe national championship game. Is that right? 21,000 points to Swanny. 21-0. Put him in the bank, Swanny. Put him in the bank. 21-0. Alabama over LSU that season. Tigers entered the BCS championship undefeated. Alabama came in with 1 loss, that loss being that 9-6 game. We had a quick break. We come back with more of the show that shakes the Southland right after this.
Now is most dependable traffic, sponsored by Pope Davis Tire and Automotive.